My parents kicked me out for failing Galactic College. Years later, they came crawling for help, but I refused. I was only 20 when my world came crashing down. The dream of following in my parents' footsteps at Galactic College had turned into a nightmare. I was supposed to be the best, the brightest, the one who'd carry on the family legacy, but instead, I failed, miserably. It wasn't just that I flunked out of my classes. I failed to meet every expectation they had for me. I couldn't live up to their image of a perfect child, someone who would excel in intergalactic studies, who would join the prestigious ranks of scholars and innovators. The pressure was unbearable, and in the end, I crumbled. It didn't take long for them to make their disappointment known. The day I came home with my official dismissal from Galactic College, my mother looked at me with cold, judgmental eyes. My father didn't even speak. They packed up my things and handed me a one-way ticket back to the outer colonies. As if I were some kind of burden. I was no longer welcome in their home, no longer part of their perfect, glittering future. They kicked me out with barely a word of comfort, leaving me to fend for myself on a distant world. For years, I wandered. I took on odd jobs, worked with people who didn't care about my past or my pedigree. I learned to survive, to make something of myself without the constant weight of my parents' expectations hanging over me. Slowly, I built a life, one I was proud of. My work may not have been glamorous, but I'd earned every piece of it. Then, one day, I received a message. It was from them. It started innocently enough. "We need your help," it said. "We've gotten ourselves into a difficult situation." The message went on to explain that they had become embroiled in some financial scandal, their assets frozen, and their prestigious connections turning away from them. They needed me, the very person they'd discarded, to bail them out. Part of me wanted to laugh. The gall, the audacity, the nerve. After all these years of silence, after everything they put me through, they were coming to me for help? They didn't even apologize for how they treated me, no. They expected me to drop everything and fix their mess. I couldn't believe it, but I wasn't surprised. It was just like them to think the world revolved around their status, their success. They were never interested in me, only the image of their perfect child. The moment I fell short, I was nothing more than a failure in their eyes. And now, with their empire crumbling, they wanted that same failure to save them? I thought about it, but not for long. The pain, the years of resentment, the abandonment, it was all too fresh. I had built a life without them. I had created something better for myself, and it didn't involve their arrogance or their need for control. So, I refused. I didn't send them a long-winded message or confront them about how they'd treated me. I simply let them know I was unavailable. I didn't owe them anything, not my time, not my help, not my forgiveness. They'd made their choice when they tossed me aside, and I had made mine. A part of me expected some kind of follow-up plea, but there was nothing. Perhaps they had hoped that my need for their approval would make me cave. They underestimated how far I'd come from the scared, desperate person I used to be. In the end, I didn't need their approval to thrive. I had built my own path, and now, I was walking it with pride, without them. As the days passed after I refused their request, I felt an odd sense of peace wash over me. It was like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had finally been lifted. The anger I once felt toward my parents, though still there in some small corner of my mind, began to fade into something else, something more like indifference. Life continued. I focused on my work, taking on new projects that challenged me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I met people who were kind, who saw me for who I was rather than the person I was expected to be. They valued me for my hard work, my integrity, and my determination, not for my family name or my background. For the first time in years, I felt like I truly belonged. Then, about 6 months after I'd turned my back on my parents, something happened that shook me. A message appeared on my hollow screen, a face I hadn't seen in years, my younger sister, Ilara. She wasn't like them. Ilara had always been the quieter one, the dreamer, not as obsessed with the family legacy or the expectations that came with it. She was the one who had tried to reach out to me when I was kicked out of the house, but I had been too bitter to accept her help. Still, she had never fully understood why I left or why I refused to return. The message was simple, short: "I need to talk. Please, just hear me out." I hesitated, but something about the message stirred something inside me. I hadn't spoken to her in years, and I wondered what had changed. After everything with my parents, I didn't know if I could go back to that world, even if it was just to talk to her. But despite my reservations, I agreed to meet her. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but when I saw her standing at the cafe, I was struck by how different she seemed. There was a weariness in her eyes, a kind of sadness I hadn't seen before. "I'm sorry," she said before I even had a chance to speak. "I never meant for things to go the way they did." Her apology wasn't just for me, it was for everything that had happened with the family, with how they treated me, and how she had been caught in the middle. It was clear that her own relationship with our parents had become strained as well. They had pushed her aside too, demanding she follow their path, but she had never been as willing as I was to conform. She was tired of their expectations, just like I was, but unlike me, she had tried to keep the peace, tried to maintain some kind of connection. I didn't know how bad it was until I saw them now. Ilara continued, her voice quiet. "They're not the same people they used to be. Everything is falling apart, and they can't fix it themselves." I was tempted to ask why they hadn't come to her for help, but I already knew the answer. It wasn't about family, not for them. It was always about their reputation, their empire, their success. They saw Ilara as a tool, just as they had seen me. Now, with nothing left to hold on to, they were desperate. But I wasn't here for them. I wasn't here for their mess or their manipulation. I was here because of her, Ilara. She looked at me, her eyes filled with vulnerability. "I know you don't owe them anything, but I'm asking you, please, if you can help them, help me." I could hear the desperation in her voice, the same desperation I had felt in myself when I was young and eager to please them, to make them proud. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had made peace with who I was, and I couldn't go back to that cycle of approval-seeking, of self-doubt. "I've built a life without them," I said slowly, "and I'm not going to throw that away to fix their problems. They never cared about me when I needed them, and I won't pretend that I'm the one who can fix their mess now." Ilara nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I understand. I really do. I just wanted you to know that I never wanted you to feel abandoned, and I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this." It was a small comfort, but it meant more to me than she could have known. We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing the years of pain, the distance, the broken family. In the end, I didn't offer to help them, not in the way they wanted, but I did promise Ilara that I'd be there for her if she needed me. She wasn't responsible for their actions, just as I wasn't, and I realized that I could still have a relationship with her, independent of the chaos they had caused. It was a new beginning, one where I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, not my parents, not anyone, just me, and whatever future I was ready to create for myself. As weeks passed after my conversation with Ilara, I found myself thinking about the choices I'd made. I'd cut ties with my parents and built a life of my own, but I couldn't deny that part of me, no matter how hard I tried to bury it, still longed for some kind of reconciliation, if only for the sake of family. But I quickly reminded myself that I was not responsible for fixing the damage they had caused. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. It wasn't up to me to clean up their mess, no matter how much guilt they tried to pile on. Ilara, on the other hand, continued to reach out. Our relationship, though fragile at first, began to grow stronger. We started meeting regularly, and each conversation brought us closer. She wasn't the same person she had been when I left. There was a maturity to her now, a recognition of the toxic hold our parents had on both of us, and slowly, I started to realize that while I couldn't save them, I could still help her in her own journey of healing. One evening, as we sat together in a quiet cafe on one of the less glamorous outer colonies, she brought up the subject again. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began, her eyes scanning the empty cup in front of her, "about how we can't change them. I think you're right. I've been trying so hard to please them, to fix things for them, but it's never enough, is it?" I shook my head. "No, it never is. They've always demanded perfection from us, but never once tried to understand who we are or what we need. We were just tools to them, extensions of their image, and that's not something we can change, no matter how hard we try." Ilara let out a long sigh. "I don't know what to do with all this anger. I've tried to bury it, to keep going along with their plans, but it's like I'm suffocating. I just want to live my own life, without them telling me what to do, without them trying to control me. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The weight of her words settled between us. I could see the conflict in her eyes, just as I had once been torn between their demands and my own desires. But she was waking up to the truth, and in doing so, she was beginning to break free of their grasp. You don't have to live for them anymore, Ilara, I said softly, reaching across the table and touching her hand. You deserve more than what they've given you. You deserve to find your own path, without their shadow hanging over you. She looked at me, her eyes filled with both fear and determination. But what if I fail? What if I make a mess of it like you did? I smiled gently. You'll only fail if you try to live someone else's life, if you try to be who they want you to be. But if you live for yourself, if you take that step and embrace who you are, flaws and all, then you can never fail. She nodded, taking in my words, and for the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of hope in her expression. She wasn't just trapped in their expectations anymore. She was starting to realize that she didn't have to be perfect, that she didn't have to carry their legacy. I think I need to walk away too, she said finally, not just from them, but from everything they've built. I need to find my own way. I can't keep trying to fix things for them. It's time I fix things for myself. And that was the moment everything shifted. Ilara was no longer the younger sister who had always sought their approval. She was becoming her own person, and for the first time, I truly believed she could do it. In the weeks that followed, she made the difficult decision to leave their orbit. She moved to a new colony, away from the glittering world of privilege and expectations. It wasn't easy. There were messages, phone calls, and even some attempts to manipulate her. But she stood firm, choosing her own future over the one they had mapped out for her. I continued to support her, offering advice when needed, but always encouraging her to make her own decisions. It wasn't about me saving her, it was about her finding the strength to save herself, and she was doing it. As for me, I felt a sense of finality settling in. I was at peace with my decision to walk away from my parents and their world. The past no longer had a hold on me. I had created something of my own, something real and true, and I didn't need anyone's approval to validate it. I still thought about my parents from time to time, but the bitterness had faded. They were who they were, and I was who I was, and that was enough. One day, as I sat at my desk, a message popped up on my holoscreen, a request from an old contact, someone I hadn't heard from in years. It was a job offer, something prestigious in the Galactic Federation, the kind of opportunity that would have once excited me, that would have meant making it in their world. But as I looked at the message, I realized something. I didn't need it. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. I'd built something better, a life that was mine, and that was more than enough. I declined the offer without a second thought, deciding that I would continue on my own path, free from the pressure to fit into a world that wasn't mine. And as I did, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude, because sometimes, walking away from the things that try to define you is the only way to find out who you truly are. Months passed, and as I continued to move forward with my life, I noticed something remarkable. I was truly happy. There was no lingering emptiness, no sense of what-ifs gnawing at me. Every decision I made came from a place of freedom, not obligation. The life I had built wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. I kept in touch with Ilara. Of course, her transformation was nothing short of inspiring. She had thrown herself into her work, something creative and fulfilling, far removed from the rigid expectations of our parents. She was finding her rhythm, figuring out what she wanted in life, and though there were struggles, she had never looked back. We spoke often, sharing our victories and challenges. She had started a new project, an innovative social initiative in the colonies, and while it wasn't easy, she was thriving. The woman who had once been afraid of her own choices was now carving out a future that was completely her own, and I couldn't have been prouder. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in, even for me. Late at night, when I sat in my small but cozy apartment, I would sometimes wonder about my parents. Had they changed? Had they learned anything from their mistakes? And despite everything they'd done, despite how much they had hurt me, I found myself wishing that one day, they might reach out, not out of desperation, but with genuine understanding, not just to fix their own mess, but to truly apologize for how they had discarded us. Then one evening, just as I was about to log off from work, A message pinged on my hollow screen. The sender's name made my heart race. It was from them. I stared at the message for a long time before opening it, not sure what to expect. The message was simple. Just a few words: we need to talk. We've made a huge mistake. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. After all, what good would come from reopening old wounds? They'd made their choice years ago, and I'd moved on. But something inside me, something I didn't quite understand, compelled me to respond. With a deep breath, I typed back, "What do you want?" The reply came quickly. "We know we've failed you. We never understood what we did, but we see it now. We've lost everything, and it's clear we've lost you too. But we're asking, please, will you help us rebuild? Not just our wealth or reputation, but us. Will you give us a chance to make things right?" It was a lot to process. My mind raced, and I found myself wrestling with emotions I thought I had long buried. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to tell them that it was too late, that they had lost the privilege of my help when they cast me aside. But somewhere deep inside, a part of me wanted to believe in the possibility of change. I thought of Alara, how far she'd come, how far I had come. Neither of us needed them anymore, but the wounds they'd left hadn't fully healed, and perhaps, just maybe, there was room for a different kind of healing. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to think. The next day, I sat with my thoughts and my memories. I thought about all the years I spent chasing their approval, trying to live up to an ideal that wasn't mine to begin with. And I thought about Alara's journey, her courage in walking away from their expectations to become her true self. If she could do it, so could I. I was no longer the child seeking their validation. I was someone who had found their own worth, and I didn't need to let them back into my life to prove anything. But I also realized that forgiveness wasn't about them, it was about me. It wasn't about helping them rebuild their empire or reputation. It was about healing the pain that had festered in my heart for so long. With that clarity, I typed my response. "I'm not who you want me to be anymore. I've moved on, and I've built a life that's my own. I don't owe you anything, but I'm willing to talk, if you're truly ready to listen, not to fix things, but to understand why they were broken." I hit send and sat back, waiting. It didn't feel like victory, nor did it feel like defeat. It just felt like the next step in my journey, one where I could finally be free of the past, regardless of whether they chose to be a part of my future. A week later, we arranged a meeting. It wasn't in some grandiose office or luxurious estate. It was in a small, neutral space, quiet, unassuming. Just the three of us, me, my parents, and the ghosts of our past. When I walked in, they looked different, older, yes, but also smaller, humbled in a way I had never seen them before. There was no arrogance, no sense of entitlement. There was only regret, and maybe, just maybe, a glimpse of understanding. 4 hours, we talked. I didn't hold back, but neither did they. They told me about their failures, the things they had done wrong, and the ways they had treated me and Alara. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension, of painful silence. But as the hours passed, something shifted. They weren't asking for my forgiveness, not yet. They were asking for the chance to make amends, even if it was just a little bit. In the end, I didn't promise to help them rebuild their empire, but I did promise to be open to a new kind of relationship, one that was based on honesty, not control, one where, maybe for the first time, we could truly be a family, without expectations, without pressures. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was something real, something that was, in its own way, enough. And with that, I took a deep breath and let go of the past, stepping forward into a future where I was free to define myself, not by their standards, but by my own. Months passed after that meeting, and things between my parents and me, though still fragile, started to evolve in unexpected ways. I wasn't ready to fully let them back into my life, but I had made the choice to move forward with a sense of openness, albeit with caution. The trust had been broken so many times that rebuilding it was like trying to stitch together a shattered glass, delicate and painstaking, but not impossible. Ilara, too, was doing well. Her project was gaining momentum, and her sense of purpose had never been clearer. We continued to support each other, checking in regularly, both of us growing in ways we hadn't expected. As the months passed, I realized just how much I had missed having her in my life in a way that was free of the old expectations that had once held us both captive. One day, as I was settling into my usual routine, I received a call from Alara. Her voice, though soft, carried an edge of excitement. "I need your help," she said, "but not for me, for something much bigger." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's going on?" "I've been offered a huge opportunity," she explained, her tone full of energy. "A chance to create a foundation for social change. Something that will impact not just the colonies, but the core worlds too. It's ambitious, but it could be a game changer, and I want you to be a part of it." Her words left me speechless. It was an offer that no one could ignore. To be part of something that could reshape the future, to create tangible change, it was everything I had ever wanted to be a part of. And yet, there was still a part of me that hesitated, unsure of how it would affect the delicate balance I had found in my own life. "You've been working on this for a while, haven't you?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "4 months, it's finally happening, but I can't do it alone. You've always been my rock. I need you, now more than ever." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt. I had built something for myself, yes, but this was the kind of opportunity that could not only change lives, but also allow me to help others in a way I had always dreamed of. To be part of something meaningful, bigger than anything I had done before, it was tempting. Still, I couldn't ignore the nagging doubt that lingered in the back of my mind. What if my parents tried to interfere again? What if their expectations, resurfaced and derailed everything I had worked so hard to build? The thought made my stomach tighten. But Alara was different. She had carved her own path, and now, she was asking for my help, not because she needed saving, but because she believed in my ability to make a difference, and I had always believed in her. After a moment of reflection, I made my decision. "I'll help you," I said, my voice firm but full of determination. "But on one condition: we do this on our terms, our vision. No strings attached. No interference from anyone, not even from them." Ilara laughed, relief washing over her. "Deal." And so, we began the process of launching the foundation. It wasn't easy. There were logistical hurdles, political opposition, and more than one sleepless night. But as we worked together, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't known in years. This wasn't about approval. It wasn't about legacy or reputation. It was about creating real, lasting change in the world, and that was something worth fighting for. As the foundation gained traction and our influence grew, there was a shift within me. I realized that I didn't have to be afraid of the future, or of what my parents might think or try to manipulate. I was no longer seeking their approval because I had found something more important: my own sense of worth, my own identity. One day, a letter arrived from my parents. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I opened it with a mixture of curiosity and caution. It was short, but it carried weight. "We have watched from afar as you and Alara have worked to create something meaningful. We realize now that the path we laid out for you both was wrong, and we deeply regret the way we treated you. We can never undo the damage we've done, but we hope, one day, you might find it in your heart to forgive us. We understand if that's not possible." Reading those words, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. It wasn't the apology I had expected, nor the one I had wanted, but it was the beginning of something, a recognition that they had failed us, and an acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. It wasn't enough to change the past, but perhaps it was enough to begin healing the rift between us. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I sat with it, letting the weight of their words settle within me. In the end, I realized that forgiveness didn't have to mean accepting them back into my life. It didn't have to mean pretending that everything was okay. Forgiveness, I came to understand, was more about letting go of the past so that it didn't hold me back anymore. And that's exactly what I did. A few weeks later, I responded, not with anger or resentment, but with a simple message. "I've moved forward. I hope you will, too. But I cannot change the past, and I cannot undo what's been done. I've built a life that is mine, and I will continue to do so. I hope you can respect that." It wasn't an angry rejection, but a firm declaration that my life was no longer bound by their expectations. They had made their choices, and so had I. From there, things began to settle into a new normal. The foundation continued to grow, and Alara and I found ourselves in a rhythm of collaboration that was unlike anything we had ever shared before. We were building a future, not as children of our parents' legacy, but as two individuals working together to shape something better. As for my parents, they didn't contact me again, and I didn't expect them to. We had all taken different paths, and it was clear that the best thing for all of us was to continue moving forward, not backward. I had built my own legacy, one that was defined by my choices, my values, and my work, and in doing so, I had finally found the peace and freedom I had spent so many years searching for. The past was behind me, the future was mine to shape, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. As the months turned into a year, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come. The foundation had become a success, its initiatives gaining traction not just in the colonies but across several systems. It wasn't easy work, but the difference it was making felt like the reward I had been waiting for. Alara and I had continued to work closely together, our relationship evolving into something far beyond the confines of sibling rivalry. It was no longer about what we owed our parents or what they expected of us. It was about our shared purpose, our drive to do something meaningful in a world that had so often tried to make us fit into a mold that wasn't ours. I saw in her the same fire I had once had, a fire that was now directed toward helping others, empowering people to create their own futures, free from the weight of their pasts. But even as things progressed and I found success in ways I hadn't imagined, there were still moments where I wondered about my parents. Were they still trapped in their cycle of needing control? Had they come to realize how their expectations had shaped my life, and how much pain it had caused? I didn't have the answers, and, honestly, I wasn't sure I was ready to ask. Then, one day, out of nowhere, I received a message. It was from Alara. I'm not sure how to say this, but we've been invited to a gala, the one our parents are hosting. I know it's been a while, and we haven't been involved in their world in so long, but they've reached out, and they're asking for us to be there, together, to represent the family. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure of what to feel. It had been years since I had been involved in their world, and the very idea of stepping back into it seemed almost foreign. My mind flashed to all the ways they had tried to control us, all the times they had let us down. But Alara's message wasn't just a request, it was an invitation for us to return, not as their children, but as independent people who had created our own paths. It wasn't an invitation to play by their rules, but a sign that they were ready to acknowledge us as equals. At least, that's how it seemed. I called Alara immediately, my thoughts swirling. What do you think? I asked. Are we really going to step back into their world, after everything? Alara was quiet for a moment. I don't know, but I think it's time. Not for them, for us. I want us to show them that we've done something meaningful, on our terms. I don't know what it will look like, but I think this is our moment to show them who we are now. Her words hit me hard, and I realized that she was right. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about us. It was about us stepping into a world that had once defined us and owning it, not to ask for their approval, but to show them what we had accomplished despite their attempts to control our lives. We'll do it, I said, feeling a sense of finality in my words. But we do it for us, not them. Alara agreed, and so we made the decision. We would go to the gala, but we would do it on our own terms. We weren't going to pretend that everything was fine or that we were the perfect children they had always wanted. We were going to be ourselves, fully, unapologetically. The night of the gala arrived, and as I stepped into the grand hall, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the past pressing against me. The lights were dazzling, the decorations ornate, and the air was thick with the tension of 1,000 conversations. But amidst it all, I felt calm. This wasn't my world anymore, and it hadn't been for a long time. But tonight, it would be a reminder that I was not defined by anyone's expectations, not even theirs. When Alara and I entered the room, heads turned, whispers rippled through the crowd as people looked at us, not as the children they had once tried to control, but as two independent individuals who had made their own way. There was something liberating in that. We weren't here to conform, we were here to be seen as equals, not subordinates. My parents noticed us immediately. They didn't approach us right away, but I could see the mixture of emotions in their eyes: surprise, regret, maybe even admiration, when they finally made their way toward us. It wasn't the usual air of superiority. They seemed almost tentative. "Look at you two," my father said, his voice soft, uncharacteristically humble. You've grown. We didn't expect this. Not after everything that happened." My mother stood beside him, her usual poise replaced by something more uncertain. "We've watched from afar, and we're proud of what you've become. We should have seen it sooner, but we're sorry." I looked at them, feeling a swirl of emotions that I hadn't expected. There was still pain, still the remnants of everything they had put us through. But there was also a sense of closure. Something had shifted. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were simply acknowledging that we had taken control of our lives in a way they hadn't expected, and maybe even respected. I took a deep breath, letting the moment settle. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "But we didn't do this for you. We did it for ourselves. And we've made something real. Something we can be proud of." Ilara nodded in agreement. "We don't need your approval anymore. We've learned how to build our own future." For a moment, there was silence. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was a moment of recognition. A moment where everything that had been left unsaid over the years seemed to find a resolution. It was clear that the old patterns weren't going to be revisited. We were no longer the children they tried to control. We were adults, making our own choices and building our own futures. As the night continued, we spoke to old acquaintances, exchanged pleasantries with distant relatives. But it wasn't the same. We didn't need to play the part they had once expected us to. We were free. That night, I left the gala feeling a quiet sense of pride. It wasn't about the event itself. It wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about knowing, deep down, that I had built a life on my own terms. And that, in the end, was enough. The future was still unwritten, but I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to let anyone, family, society, or anyone else, define who I was again. The legacy I was creating would be one of my own choosing, and no one could take that away.